Welcome to another episode of Season 2 of the Panjwai podcast. As always, you can find our episodes on all podcast platforms, as well as YouTube and Facebook for the video episodes. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button on your platform of choice, and if you enjoy what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a nice 5-star review.
If you want to support the podcast financially, we've set up a few ways for you to do so this season. You can become a patron by hopping over to patreon.com/thepanjwai podcast and sign up for a small monthly donation. If you want to make a one-time donation, you can find us on Venmo at the Panjwai podcast. And last but not least, we've got a small selection of merchandise in our store. So if you head over to thepanjwaipodcast.com and click on the store tab, you'll see stickers and other merchandise, and who knows what might come down the pipeline. So remember, on all three platforms, that's the Panjwai podcast. Panjwai podcast. Thank you. Well, you know, there's the 30-year cycle, which is this theory that every 30 years, and there's of course there's like a 10 and a 20-year cycle too, but every 30 years there's a reemergence of fashions and trends and things like that from the people's childhood, so that people who grew up in the 90s are now in positions of power and decision making, and so they are the fashion designers and the movie makers and things like that. That's why we're seeing the big bump in this like 80s and 90s style.
That's a real thing, man. Like, so at the MEPS, you know, all these kids are coming through trying to start their military careers. They're 17, 18, 19. And this kid came through a couple of days ago with a Carolina Charlotte Hornets jacket on with the pink and the teal and the white, and it's made out of like windbreaker material. And I'm like, what the fuck? I saw that. Last time I saw that coat was like 6th grade.
Yeah.
And it was brand new. He paid $80 for it.
Yeah. Well, if you remember when we were like high school age, the 70s thing, like the bell bottoms and the big floral print stuff, and like that was kind of back in style for a few years there. So there's something to it.
And the good news is the 80s are next. So
the 80s was a good, music and
musically and fashion wise. Yeah. Can't complain.
No, can't complain.
That's when America was at its best, you know.
It really was, you know.
Nintendo was brand new.
Nintendo was new. We could interfere with the affairs of foreign governments in actual secrecy, and it wasn't being tweeted all over the internet. We could take over countries like, I don't know, Guam,
El Salvador.
As long as it wasn't the Soviet Union acting like an asshole, the world didn't care.
Yeah. We took over like 3 countries in the 80s. No one even knows about it.
Oh man.
Good old days.
Allowed, Mexico to become a narco state.
Yep.
Same to Colombia, you know.
Big help from the CIA there too.
Yeah.
More than just allowed it.
Yeah, gently nudged Mexico into a narco state.
Yeah.
Took the power out of the Colombians' hands.
Thanks, Nathan Reagan. War on drugs.
Temporarily. Yeah, well.
Rip.
Speaking of wars that never end.
Good transition. So actually, in this episode, we're sitting here with Doc Rudy, who was our senior medic for the company at Sperwan Ghar in 2012. And he's jumped back on here to kind of give us another perspective on things in Sperwan Ghar back then that maybe we can't really do given our limitations. And so,
Brandon, we always kind of open these things by giving you kind of an opportunity to give us your elevator speech. You know, basically your background, why you chose to join the Army, why you chose to become a medic, and kind of the short path that led you to being the lead medic at COP Sperwan Ghar.
All right. Before I joined the Army, I was working as a meat cutter in a grocery store. I've been married a couple years. We were expecting our 3rd child, and actually, the Army was the last branch of choice for me. I tried to go Navy and ended up failing the drug test for marijuana. So they kind of booted me, out. And after that, I went to the Marine Corps, and they were like, "You got too many kids." And the Air Force was like, "The Navy didn't want you. We don't want you either." But the Army was like, yeah, we'll take you. You're going to Iraq. So
come on in.
Man, that is a common theme.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, I was tired of going home covered in blood every day. And then I became a medic. So I tried to become a helicopter pilot, and the Army couldn't pass the colorblind test. I have a red-green deficiency, and they were like, you can be a medic, though. And the funny thing about that is we bleed red and we wear green uniforms. So didn't make a whole lot of sense to me there either. But I ended up becoming a medic, went off to the basic in AIT, then went to Fort Stewart, deployed to Iraq with 2-7 infantry. Came back and then went over to 164. Not quite a PCS, but it was a change of scenery. And then from 164, went. You guys know the rest of the story.
Parts of it. It's funny you mentioned the colorblindness thing because Alex Berner told us the same thing. He failed his colorblindness test, and they gave him. What did they give? They offered him medic or it was something else. It was like Apache, like flight planner. It was like basically a flight operations guy. It's like both things that require you to have color.
I'm glad he chose medic.
Yeah,
for sure.
Like I loved our flight ops guys. They really helped us out, but they don't do anything. It's a horrible job.
Really?
They're just radio bitches, and it sucks. And all they do is stand there, just hand out radios and night vision goggles to the pilots. They just sit in like a room all the time. It's a thankless job. But I thank you guys for what you did for making sure that we could accomplish our mission. But I hope that you move on to other things.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so you got to experience that 2-7 deployment that I think immediately followed Luke's deployment, and Tom Evans was on that deployment too, and it was, from what I understood, that was kind of the same vibe as Luke's deployment. It was pretty benign,
violent less.
Yeah. So there was one IED that went off in our vicinity. We treated a civilian. Actually, my partner medic treated that guy, and other than that, it was quiet. We were closing up fobs and moving to Baghdad about halfway through the deployment, and this was going into the transition into New Dawn.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we kind of fell, like our Afghanistan deployment kind of fell conveniently in between two of those phases. Because the unit after us in Afghanistan, they were closing down fobs and they were doing the same thing. And Luke and Brandon, your previous deployments, you were closing down fobs and doing your things. Like the time that we were in Afghanistan was kind of the last
big push.
Last time frame in Afghanistan where combat against the Taliban was the actual priority.
Yeah, for sure.
To whatever degree that it was actually a priority. But it's kind of interesting how that kind of times out. So you were with us previous to the issuing of the orders of going to Afghanistan. You went with us, or went with Luke to NTC. I wasn't even a twinkle in 164's eye. What were you hearing as you got to NTC about what was going to be coming down the pipe, and how'd that affect the decisions within the medics platoon about where the medics were going to go as far as companies and cops and stuff?
So going into NTC, I don't remember hearing a whole lot about what we were going to do the first week. I think it was about halfway through we started hearing about us deploying to Panjwai and the sort of things we would expect there, especially with the IEDs. So yeah, it was all training up until that point, and then it was kind of like after you started hearing where you're going to go, it was kind of an oh shit moment, and from there just started trying to, I think, try to wrap my mind around it. I didn't really, at NTC, plan too much for what was going to happen in Afghanistan. It was more like right before we left, a couple months before we left to actually go, that we were, myself and United Salvadoran Burner, usually it was us three just trying to come up with schemes to like be better medics while we were out there. And we had no idea what the fuck we were doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were trying to modify litters and shit in my backyard and just doing weird shit that as an E5, senior line medic, it just didn't have the experience to prepare for that.
Yeah. I mean, we had a exceptional group of medics at Sperwan Ghar. And I imagine they couldn't have been by accident. You take a platoon of medics in an infantry battalion or an armor battalion, like you're bound to have some, your normal range of competency. It's kind of like a bell curve, right? Couple shitbags, lots of pretty decent people, a few standout, really good guys, a few guys that are above average, and then a few guys that are just like, the greatest thing to ever happen to 68 whiskey. How did it end up that we kind of got that front half of the bell curve?
Yeah, so talking with you guys before, just super thankful for how much support I got from the medical platoon leadership. After NTC, went to them and they pretty much let me handpick who I wanted to take with me. So, being allowed to take burner, to take to grab Doan later on, to snatch up Salvador and bring them to Afghanistan with us was a blessing. And then even later on, after we had been, more than halfway through the deployment, the medical platoon pushing Todd to us and, just getting that the best of the best, I think. That was a game changer, I think, in the survivability of our guys out there.
Yeah, and I'm speaking for me at least, the competency of our medics was never in doubt for us. And what we appreciated about our medics, and maybe this is against the Geneva Convention, but they were gunslingers, man. They were not afraid to get in a gunfight.
Yeah.
They were like, I've met medics like, when I'm in combat, I just strap my M4 in my backpack. I don't even touch it. I'm like, what are you doing? But our guys were like, no, man, they really embodied, tactical casualty care, which is, hey, you got to finish the fight first.
I think most of the engagements that you guys, especially the platoon, saw out there, you'd see the medics out there refilling their ammo, just like the 11 Bravos. They definitely were not afraid to throw rounds down range.
Yeah, which, you always include Doc. Like, Doc is a grunt. You do not call Doc a pogue. You don't don't do it. But it's even easier to call him a fellow grunt when you see him out there, just like Doc Salvador, just like, fuck you, motherfucker!
Yeah, and that's pretty much how he'd say it, too.
Yeah, that was
a pretty good impression, actually.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right, man. I mean, it's good for us to look up and see people, because when, unless their their medical care is immediately needed, get a gun in the fight. And it was always cool to kind of have that connection with our medics, for sure, because they were. And another big thing about our line medics, and I kind of like for you to speak to this a little bit, Brandon, is like they went on every single patrol. So like we got breaks, but guys like Sal and Burner, they were out there every freaking day, no matter what was going on. So that's a huge ask of those guys.
Yeah, they never complained about it either. I will throw that out there. They didn't complain, and they didn't. The few breaks that I could give them, they never asked for. I think they handed over some of their patrols to me reluctantly because, as we talked about before, they owned you guys. You were theirs. You belonged to them, and they wanted to go out there and take care of y'all. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of heads up did you have? Because you were in charge of all the medics, so it's your job to tell them, to prepare them for what kind of injuries they might be facing going into their AO. I mean, what were you getting before the deployment, either from the previous unit or even when we got there? Like, what kind of heads up were you getting about what to expect?
The majority of the stuff that I heard about was just amputations, which obviously we saw a lot of. That was pretty much it, and you can only prep on a tourniquet with so much. I mean, you guys do it as CLS as well.
Yeah.
So you just try to hit that whole spectrum. So yeah, you're going to expect amputations, but we kind of practice to treat everything imaginable, and I think we did pretty good job of it before we got out there.
Yeah.
Were we prepared 100%? Hell no. There's no way you could have been, but those guys, they got some pretty good training. We did some, hopefully Peter's not listening, but we did some live tissue labs, and we're able to go out there and do that before going out to deployment. So that helped a lot too.
Well, we're not very political on this podcast, but we can universally say fuck PETA.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
I think it's apolitical. I enjoy beef and chicken and even chicken breasts, which are very similar to a slightly removed human calf, apparently.
And bacon, of course. I mean, PETA can't be American if they don't like bacon.
No,
Yeah, right.
No, so again, fuck PETA.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. Panjwai podcast says fuck PETA. It was interesting when we talked to Burner, and it's kind of cool. We talked to two of the medics close to each other because we get to throw things back and forth off against each other while it's still fresh. He was talking about how his experience with the IEDs in Iraq and his deployment, his very first deployment, was like dudes just pink mist, just completely just getting evaporated by these massive IEDs. And I know for me, like when they told us it was a high IED area, that's where my mind went. I was like, oh my God, I'm just going to step on an IED and I'm going to disappear. I wasn't prepared for how complex the injuries would be from something as minuscule as a 5 or 6 pound IED. Was that something that you had come to expect as well? Like those single, like the simple kind of below the knee amputations, or were you expecting more complex, double, triple amputation kind of situations?
So, I told you guys before, a couple of the guys in the medical platoon called me doom and gloom because, I went to the platoon sergeant and said, hey, I need the best medics and, all the equipment, like the newest, best medical equipment you can give me. And we need our own time to train. You need to only leave us with the infantry company while we're still here. Like no medical platoon bullshit. Like, so I was definitely always preparing for the worst. And, that pink mist situation is, one of your worst nightmares, somebody stepping on a cheese wheel and just disappearing. And that was kind of always what we thought. And I think we were arrogant enough to think that we'd be able to save you anyway, but yeah, that's what we planned for.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, that's what we planned for. And, quad and triple amputations are kind of what you expected. And we were fortunate enough, and I know it's kind of shitty to say, but to only have single and doubles in a lot of cases. We were very unlucky with the rate of IEDs out there, but we were fortunate with how small some of them were.
Yeah, and that's I think that was, if you find a silver lining in it, it's that they no longer have the ability to have access to all those Russian munitions, and they were having to build their own explosives. So suddenly it's a treasured and valued resource that they can't just afford to throw 150-pound IEDs together. And yeah, I was thankful for that personally.
Yeah.
I know we joked around, me and Clark, before he got his leg blown off. It's like 5 pounds or less. 5 pounds or less, we're good. It's a 5-pounder, I'm going to keep my knees and it'll be okay. What about the unit that we replaced? Did they give you, did the medics there give you any kind of handover where they were like, nope, we're out of here, bye, good luck?
No, they gave us a handover. It wasn't as much as I would have liked. So when we got in there, it was more focused on vector control, sanitation, making sure that our water was drinkable.
Sure.
And well, I guess we weren't really drinking that. We had bottled water, but that we could use it for showers. And just, I don't know, the layout of the aid station, which we changed altogether.
Sure.
As soon as Captain Cothrell came in, we made our own thing work, and then we continued to refine it throughout the deployment. So the handout was okay. It would, there were things that we could have done better. But there were things that I could have done better when I handed off too. Again, I was an inexperienced sergeant. And the guy that handed off to me was an inexperienced sergeant. So you can only expect but so much.
Like those handovers, I mean, you can tell people all day what to expect.
Yeah.
Everyone approaches a problem with their own biases. So, you can tell them, hey, you do it this way. We've been doing it like this and it's been working. We tried it this way and it doesn't work. But they've been training this one way for this deployment for 6 months, and there's no way they're just going to not do what they trained for.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were guilty of it too. The unit that replaced us was guilty. Everybody does it. It is 100% across the board. Nobody listens to the unit before that.
Like, they failed here, but I'm better than they are, so I'll do it better.
Yeah. Well, those guys know what they're talking about. Yeah. And then finally 3 months later, you're like, they were right.
Yeah, we I don't dog them out too bad, but the unit that replaced us, I overheard their CO, it was right before we left, maybe even just a few hours before we left. He had all his guys in a little cluster, and it was their Advon party maybe, or his NCOs, and he was giving a motivational speech, and he's like, we're going to take back the roads, and I was just like, oh man. It's like these poor bastards, you know. And we told them, we drilled it into their heads, like, don't take the roads. And I got a story about that very last patrol. That makes me mad, but I'll save it for a different day.
You've told it. You told that story.
Oh, did I? Okay.
Yeah, how you painstakingly cleared a path across the road and told everyone not to go on it, and you look back and they're all just up and down the road.
Yeah.
That was a hard lesson for us to learn too, to stop walking on the roads. Like, it's so tempting. Like it's, I just have to follow that little path and I get where I want to go. It's right there.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean, it kind of seemed like they felt like they knew better on that last mission too. That guy that caught that round in the helmet. I mean, they're kind of out away from the security that we had set up and kind of peeking their head around shit. And then you catch a round in the helmet.
Well, that was actually our EOD guy. He'd been there for months.
No, the guy that caught the round in the helmet was one of the...
It was Aaron Correa. He was one of the EOD guys.
No, I thought he was one of the other guys.
Mm-mm. Yeah. But the EOD guys are pretty aggressive too. They like to get into fights, probably more than they should have.
Yeah, that's true too.
So I can't fault them. I love those
Definitely
guys.
makes a medic nervous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. It's like, God, could you just like do your job and not... Please.
No stomping around.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Don't get shot.
Oh, you mentioned Captain Cottrell, and that's one thing we've mentioned in the past, that we had a PA on the COP, which and the more I kind of speak to people from other units, that was pretty unusual for us to have a PA at a COP. At least, let me take it back. Through our little scope, most cops in Iraq did not have a PA.
No.
But from what I understand, a lot of cops in Afghanistan did, just because of the differences in the terrain and accessibility and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, I mean, doctrinally, you'll have your battalion aid station guys, usually your platoon sergeant and your main aid station or forward aid station set up at a FOB. At a COP, you're not going to... I mean, we had an aid station, too. I mean, we had all the medications we needed. We had 2 trauma tables, we had a triage area, and we had a huge SLZ. So to have all that on top of a PA, I think was unusual. And we were fortunate, and I think it's a testament to how serious the people that were handling the logistics above us took the situation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a great asset for us because he was also kind of removed, even though he was an officer and a captain and all that stuff. He was kind of a good sounding board for us, and he would kind of pull us aside sometimes and just kind of be like, "Hey, man, how's things going?" and checking in on people's mental health. And so, yeah, he was really solid in that role, and he did a good job supporting our company in that regard.
Yeah, he was not only was he an officer, but he was a former infantryman. He was he was in Ranger Regiment before he switched over to become a PA.
Yep.
So not only was he totally qualified on the medical side, but he had an insight on the infantry side that even most of us didn't have. And so I'm very grateful that we had him, especially, like you said, when it comes to the mental health stuff, because he was able to kind of guide us a little bit, like to be equal rank with Captain Kitching and have that kind of sounding board up there, like, hey, these guys need a day. Like, it's smart to give them a day. I think that was a great benefit, because if he had just been a straight PA, he wouldn't have had that kind of respect.
I've never met a PA. Well, I had never met a PA like him before, and I haven't met one since. We were, I mean, not just having the PA, we were fortunate, but having him specifically.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing with the medics. He could sit down and talk to them and make them feel better as well. And it never felt like a mental health thing. It never felt like you were talking to a captain. It felt like you were talking to somebody who had been in the trenches or was in the trenches with you. Even though he didn't necessarily always go out, you never felt like he wasn't part of that team.
Right.
So we were very fortunate.
Yeah, for sure. And you got to work with him enough that you guys kind of developed a good, solid working relationship, right?
He was my best friend in Afghanistan, man. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, we lived together. There were 2 rooms in that aid station. Bring somebody in that lost both their legs, and you work on them together, and then you go sit down and play Super Smash Brothers and bullshit. Like, it was just transitioning from one thing to the next, and it was never uncomfortable. And
yeah,
I was fortunate to have him there as well.
Yeah,
cool.
Well, that's another thing we kind of wanted to ask you about was, a large portion of your job was administrative in nature as the chief medic. So you have your line medics that are in the platoons, and they're usually the ones going out on missions, and you're managing them directly. But you also have responsibilities in the aid station, and that's a lot of stuff we didn't get to see a lot, because if we were out doing missions, if they brought a local national or a policeman into the aid station, we wouldn't even know about it unless we happened to come back while they were there. So you could tell us a little bit about what it was like running the aid station on Sperwan Ghar, what kind of things you were seeing there.
Yes, as I kind of spoke to you earlier, is a lot of just constantly refining things. And I hate to say it, but you kind of use the local nationals and the A&P and A&A to practice, so that when you have your guys come up, you could do it perfect. And that's not to say we didn't do the best that we could on those guys, because none of the medics, myself or Captain Cothrell, ever thought that one life was more valuable than another. They would bring in guys. A lot of times you guys would be out on mission. Sometimes it would be later at night. It would be weird, because you get a knock on the door, and it could be Grace coming in and asking, for some Tylenol. It could be Stefan coming in and asking if we want to play Axis and Allies, or it could be 3 guys holding another dude with no legs. It was a weird situation. But like I said, we used those times to make it better for y'all when y'all showed up and needed the help.
Now, most of those that came in, were they civilians, or were they like police and army?
There were quite a few kids that would show up, that would step on the damn IEDs they would put out. Because the A&A cop was right there, a lot of them would come with an escort, and they would ask, to have something more medical than trauma looked at. So, it's like a skin condition, or the idiots hadn't eaten or drank anything in 7 days, and they're wondering why they can't walk. But, sometimes it was kids with no legs, and sometimes it was a guy that just wanted some Tylenol or had an STD.
We should clarify, most of those were probably Afghan.
Yeah, those were asking. Yeah, the American soldiers never came with any STDs. If they ever caught any from each other, they never told me.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, that's kind of a unique position in that, like I said, you were on the base, you were there as the senior medic, so you covered down for your guys sometimes, but you also said your guys basically told you not. Like I said, they had ownership over their platoon, so they wanted to go out with them. But because you were the medic, when something like that came on to the base, the rest of us, if we're saying, we're hanging out, and all of a sudden we hear a truck roll up and it's full of AOP that got fucked up, we don't have to do anything. We can remove ourselves from the trauma.
But you guys did do stuff. You guys always came and helped carry guys to the HLZ. So it wasn't, there were like 4 or 5 medics on the COP, but it was a company of medics when the time called for it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you guys talked about, the medics throwing rounds downrange, well, we felt the same way about y'all, because you guys were always willing to carry, to wrap up, to treat. I know we're going to get into Brazes here in a little bit, but I had help there. I had help with all the injuries that I've seen. I've had help from 11 Bravos. It wasn't just always medics there. So sometimes, they would bring in patients and you guys didn't know they were there. But if y'all knew they were there, I'd have to tell people to get out of the fucking aid station. Like, dude, we need space. You got to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I mean, I can think of several instances. In fact, I can think of 0 instances where a medic was working on a casualty by themselves.
Yeah, me too.
Not one.
Yep.
I can think of several where there was no medic that was available to work on only one situation like that, but or when the medic had to be worked on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and we've mentioned it in an earlier episode, but we thought that our pre-deployment CLS training was phenomenal. Like I as a brand new private straight out of basic training, I felt absolutely competent that if the person next to me lost their leg, that I knew what to do.
And that was a big push that I, did with the medics, but mostly it came from, Captain Kitchen. I remember having a long conversation with him. He's like, train these Bravos. Like, they need to know how to do CLS. And as, inexperienced E5, the company commander is telling you to do something, you do it. But if he hadn't, I don't think our CLS program would have been as good as it was.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, when I went back through CLS again in 2017, it was a joke. It was an absolute joke. I mean, and I didn't even get a CLS certificate when I pre-deployed to Afghanistan in 2012. We just did the training.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We just did it, either before Afghanistan or some of it was while we were in Afghanistan. In fact, the most valuable was while we were in Afghanistan because I was brand new. But when we did it in JBLM in 2017, I was laughing. I was like, "What do you?" They would go through all these things and trying to make it this like smoker of a 40-hour course and doing like, "Oh, you got to do a low crawl. I want you to do this." I'm like, "How about you just treat these guys how to treat the most basic injuries correctly and try to tell them to do 20 things that they're never going to be allowed to do."
Mhm.
Like, there's no way that guy's going to do an NPD. Like, never, ever, ever. I'm sorry, NCD. He's never going to do an NCD. He, like, I don't know. That was just my opinion. It was complete garbage, and we made sure that was in the feedback.
And the 68 Whiskeys saw the same type training in Table 8s. It's like, you got these staff sergeants that are running these courses, and they're like, well, the only way this course is going to be valuable is if I make them carry this 220-pound mannequin 3 miles. And the last Table 8 that I went to was such good training. It was at Fort Carson. It was only about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And they're teaching you now how to push antibiotics, how to push,
Wow.
blood clotting. What is it called? It's called tranexamic acid, TXA, but it encourages blood clots, teaching you how to push all sorts of meds, they're doing whole blood now on the battlefield. They're talking about changing it to a combat paramedic instead of combat medic. So the training now, I think people are starting to figure out you don't have to be this fucking alpha male type and make people sweat to make them learn. If you can make them learn and understand why they're doing what they're doing, then you can actually have effective battlefield medicine.
Well, and we hope to have him on at some point, but the unit that we replaced, they had an LT that was a double amputee, and he holds the record for the most like pints of blood like delivered through a combat transfusion. There's a great article. I'll throw it up under the podcast links. He reached out to us and talked to us a little bit, and we're going to hopefully talk to some of those guys that are involved in that. But yeah, it was like an Army record. They did like blood transfusions in the field, like waiting on, it was like 14 hours or something of blood transfusion, something crazy.
Yeah.
And that was just that was a medic. That was a super motivated medic, super squared away, and a bunch of guys that were like infantry guys that were like, hey, yeah, let's do this. So that training goes a long way. You instill confidence in people, and they do incredible things. And I know that the training that I was always the most grateful for was the anti-hemorrhaging training, knowing what to do with a chest seal, know how to pack a wound, how to wrap a wound. There's about 4 or 5 things that if you're confident and you know how to do them well, you can treat 90% of battlefield injuries.
Yep.
So we definitely appreciate the time that you guys took helping us be competent on those skills.
And I think it was too easy to get them, Sal and Burner out there to train you guys because they just loved watching y'all stick NPAs in each other. So it was too easy to get some CLS training going.
I managed to avoid that until I was a CW2, and I was pretty bitter about it when somebody stuck one of those things in me.
I've never had it done to me, thankfully.
It's awful. It's the worst thing. I would rather be punched in the face.
I have a couple pre-deployment videos of it. I'll see if I can pull them up and send them to y'all. They're pretty funny.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Well, you spent a lot of time with the admin stuff in the aid station, but we've mentioned a few times that you would relieve the medics sometimes to go on a dismounted patrol. But you, more importantly, as the company medic, you went out with us on some of the bigger missions, specifically clearing the Horn, which was one of our first major battalion, actually it was brigade level operation, to clear the Horn of Panjwai. So you were out with, Captain Kitching's element all 7-8 days or whatever that was, right?
Yeah, most of the bigger missions, if Captain Kitchen was going out and he was going to be out for, more than the couple hours or the day patrols, then I would go out there with him. And
what can you tell us about the time in the Horn?
So the time in the Horn was the eye opener for me as a medic. Sean Brazes, he, losing him, you lose your first patient on the battlefield and you realize, like, I don't know, you kind of feel like you didn't take it as seriously as you should have. And it's not to say that I didn't train or take the training seriously, but it's like, it's not real until it actually happens, you know? So huge eye opener. And then just understanding what my role was as a senior medic. So, you know, in Iraq, I deployed as a Cav Scout medic. I didn't have a whole company under me. And going into Afghanistan, I kind of felt like the company I wasn't responsible for the entire company. I had guys under me that I was responsible for, but I wasn't responsible for an entire company of guys. It didn't feel like that. I mean, I was, but it didn't feel like that. And then when, you know, the horn happened, the fight with, you know, Brazes and the LT going down, going into the Great Putt, seeing an entire company of guys in a Great Putt just like sucking from the heat, you kind of realize like, this is a situation where I need to do something because I'm responsible for all these guys. And it's like the first realization that these are my people, all of them, even if I don't talk to them every day, even if they've got their own, you know, platoon medics. So it was, like I said, it was an eye opener.
Now, what do you recall about, you know, Brazos going down? I know Price spoke briefly about it, and Captain Kitching spoke briefly about it in his podcast with the spear. But were you near him when he was hit, or were you pretty detached and get the call from kind of a different part in the formation?
No, so I was in his formation. Him and a couple other guys had gone over that break in the wall that Captain Kitching talked about in his podcast. And I don't know, I was probably like 50 meters away. And when somebody else had gotten hit, I think it was from 3rd Platoon. And he had gotten either shrapnel or a shot in his shoulder. I can't remember his name. You know, we talked about this before. And I was sitting there smoking a cigarette with this guy after wrapping him up and determining that he didn't need to be evac'd. And then the shots kind of popped off, and I saw some of our guys pour back through that opening in the wall, and then Sean, his dog, pulling him up over the wall, and his dog got over through the clearing, and then Sean kind of fell. So he had been shot, he had been hit, and kind of rolled down into that clearing, into that opening.
Was he shot before he tried to jump the wall, or do you think he was shot as he was on
so
the wall?
So he wasn't he wasn't jumping a wall. There was a break in the wall, so it was completely open right there. Probably, you know, I'm terrible with distance, but I'd say like a 15 or 20 meter break in the wall where you could walk through it. There's a little bit of a berm there, but there was no wall.
Oh, okay.
So coming over the berm, he got hit. His dog was already over. And I think, you know, just thinking back on treating him, the dog was trying to pull him through that wall, probably knew what was going on, trying to get him out of there. And as he pulled him up, his back plate went up to a point where the round could hit. Seems like to me now, and I think it was confirmed, it ricocheted off his pelvic cradle and ended up going into his heart. But yeah, so he went down and in that berm, and I dropped, you know, I was with that guy, and I dropped to the ground, you know, take cover, eliminate that silhouette and go low. And it was just training kicking in. Yeah. And the first thing that I said when I hit the ground was, I looked at Captain Kitching. He looked back at me, and I said, "Is it safe to move up?" And medics would understand this. During your Table A trainings, you're taught the first thing you say, you know, do we have fire superiority? Is it safe to move up? Can you treat yourself? Can you get to cover? And so I asked, is it safe to move up? And it clearly was not. But as soon as I said it, I realized how fucking stupid that was, and kind of motivated myself to move forward. So I moved forward to Brazes and started to try to treat him and the LT. LT told me to leave him alone, pretty much. He had that flesh wound, that $1 million wound, so I kind of let him be and moved on to Brazes.
And I know that they got him out of there pretty quick. And there was the drama with Sicario, who was being extremely protective of Sean, and Sicario was not your normal military working dog. You know, that he was a good bit more aggressive than most of them.
Yeah.
So it was good that you had Price there to kind of keep him out of your way. But
Yeah, Price wrapped his arms around the dog as I saw the jaws snapping at my face, and as soon as Price wrapped his arms around him and pulled him back, like those jaws just like disappeared. But so weird. I mean, that's a very vivid memory in my mind. Is those teeth?
Yeah, man, that has to stick out to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I mentioned this before, but like I spent time with the military dogs all the time. Like the handler, it was a great thing for me. And Sean was the first and only handler on that deployment. Was like, no, you can't pet this dog. Even with a muzzle on, he's like, no, don't do it. I was like, okay, fair enough. That was I can only imagine how terrifying that would have been to have a dog with that kind of level of excitement, we'll say.
Yeah.
Trying to protect his handler. But I mean, it sounds like the treatment for him was, you did what you could do, and it was just to get him to that next level of care.
The hardest thing to do is to try to treat him because the rounds were coming through that opening in the wall. I mean, they all knew we were there.
Sure.
So between laying on brazes and trying to keep him from getting shot again, which also is stupid. I feel like, you look back at these things and you feel like there's a million other things you could have done. Like I could have rolled him out of there, or no matter how many things you have in your aid bag, you never feel like you did enough. I don't know. It's much more difficult to talk about with like during the interview than.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of echoes the sentiments that Alex shared about the day that we lost Lux. And honestly, it sounds like a very similar wound. Single gunshot wound, no discernible exit, and people that have spent a lot of time in the military and combat zones know that bullets do weird things. They do extremely, extremely weird things, especially when you get shot.
Very unpredictable.
Yeah, extremely. And it's, you see in the movies, everyone expects that, oh, he got shot and then the exit hole is going to be on the exact same spot on his body, just on the other side. And I'm not so sure that that's ever been the case.
Yeah, so there was no exit wound that I could find. I did a pretty good sweep of his front side, and I think it stayed in him, but I found the hole in the backside. There was really, really dark blood coming out of that hole, but it was super small. They're always really small and hard to find. He kind of was fading in and out the whole time. So I didn't know at the time that he was going to die, but when he did die, I knew it and chose not to really share with anybody. Put him on the bird like he was going to make it, and try to get out of that situation without killing the morale of the guys that were there, because
you're still in a fight.
We were still in the fight, and even if he wasn't part of our unit, everybody loved everybody who was out there because they all knew we all had each other's back. And you don't say he's dead on the battlefield; you say it after.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And he was part of the team, 100%. The EOD guys, the dog handlers, the engineers.
Yep.
They, in many ways, we treated them as better than the team because we knew that they were adding something that we couldn't add ourselves. Mm-hmm. And in every case, they were always taking on a risk that we weren't taking. The Taliban targeted dogs and dog handlers. They targeted EOD. They targeted engineers.
Yeah.
They targeted us too, but they knew that those brought something extra to the battlefield. So. I've always had a lot of love and respect for the military working dog teams. Turned me into a crazy dog nut, and that's okay. But what those guys did, what Sean was doing out there for us, we can never repay that. And we know that you did everything that you could possibly do. That was kind of the point of going down that path, was to illustrate that there's nothing you can do. Like sometimes, like these bullet wounds, they're not treatable. The best you can do is patch an entry wound and get him on an aircraft as fast as possible. Like he needed surgery. They need that next level of care. And it was the same thing for Luxmore. And I know it was tough on Burner, and I imagine it was tough on you too. So. I'm sorry. But we got word not long. I think it was later that evening that he didn't make it. But you said you already knew.
Yeah. So another one of the most vivid memories is the way that his, we were out there for a while, so he wasn't completely shaven. Uh, the sweat on his face and the short hair of his beard kind of glistened, and uh, when your pupils kind of dilate, like right at that moment. And so I did look into his eyes and see that happen, and I knew then, and that was probably like 5 minutes before the bird came in. Uh, and you guys got to help me with the name. Was it Maddox or Haddock? What was
Matic.
Maddox? Yeah, so he was kind of there, and he was trying to do the whole sternum rub and punch to the groin to try to maintain awareness.
Consciousness, yeah.
Yeah, try to get an idea of how conscious he was. And I mean, at that point, I had already known, but he probably knew too. But the things that guys will do, I mean, you got to remember at this point, we were still exposed to fire. He's sitting there exposing himself, trying to keep this guy like conscious and, keep him alive. So there is no, you talk about being afraid of that dog, and you're not really afraid of anything when somebody's life is at stake. You're more afraid of losing somebody than you are of a dog biting you or getting shot by a bullet. Your worst nightmare is just losing one of your friends.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's just complete tunnel vision. You're not even, at some point, you're not even thinking about the fact you're being shot at anymore.
Yeah. And you guys know the same. I mean, you guys did the same thing, so it's no different.
It's a little different. That day was pretty bad for 3rd Platoon. I mean, you had Brazos, you had a couple other guys get hit or wounded. It was a hot day. It's probably 130 degrees. We were in a part of Panjwai, there was no tree cover. It was pretty much open desert. I mean, some little, orchards and stuff like that. But the result was that after that big firefight, like, we had to consolidate and like get some rest. Because guys were at the verge of losing an entire platoon.
So we had actually had that heat casualty right before the firefight started. Then the firefight happened, and on the left side of that wall, I ended up lining up about 8 or 9 guys and having them take their helmets off. And yeah, it's pretty fucked up. It's in the middle of a firefight. They were behind a wall. They had cover, but they were gonna die from the heat. Like, it was fucking nasty. And so you got these guys sitting there, pants or boots unbloused, helmet off, and then helicopters dropping fucking water bombs on us. Those cases of water bottles. And I was kind of, myself and a couple of the other guys from headquarters were darting around the field just collecting up water bottles so we could take it to these guys that were just sucking because it was so fucking hot.
Mm. And that kind of culminated in an extremely iconic photograph. And if anybody has the full resolution photo of this, please send it to us. Of most of 3rd Platoon, pretty much the entirety of 3rd Platoon inside of one grape hut. And everyone is just absolutely wrecked. Everybody has an IV in their arm. Everyone, you can see it on their face. They're just completely defeated. Like, I can feel the picture. It's so surreal. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of it, there's Captain Kitching. He's squatting and he's looking around. And you can play whatever you want in your head about what he's thinking. It's like looking around at his guys, just in complete utter devastation. But it's really just an iconic photograph to say, like, this is what war is. This is young guys pushed to their absolute limit, and all of them are willing to continue on. They just need a break, So we pump them with fluids, we give them some water, we give them an hour to take a nap, and it was about an hour and a half, and then they were up, their gear was on, and they were pushing on. It's I've seen a lot of really iconic war photos, and it ranks right up there. And I think you said you might have taken that photo.
Yeah, so it took a couple while I was there. We got to that grape hut, and Burner and Sal, and then we had Sergeant First Class Dash in the MRAP, kicking fluids out of the back, birds dropping fluids off, and we were just carrying them in there and trying to get everybody hooked up to an IV line. in between giving people IVs and talking to my medics, make sure they were okay. I was taking pictures because I don't know, you're in that moment, you recognize it for what it is.
I'm glad you had the presence of mind to do so.
But I don't know if that picture's mine. I won't take credit for it because I have no idea, man.
Fair enough.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's an iconic one for our deployment, but like Curtis said, it encapsulates 1,000 other deployments too, in terms of just what it's like to just suck and to be there and slog through that stuff. So it's a hell of a picture. It's right up there with the Smothers picture.
Yeah, that's yeah. You put those two together. Whew, that Smothers picture, and we'll throw that one up too. But just it's that 1,000,000-yard stare. It's way beyond 1,000-yard stare. It's just complete. And what's crazy about that Smothers picture is there's a lot of going on in the background. There's people smoking cigarettes. There's people walking around. But then he's the only one that's not like sitting or relaxing. He's just standing there. And like some Afghan guy's giving him a hug or something. And he's just like...
There's another one of Jay, I think, sitting on a bench right outside the schoolhouse over there where 3rd Platoon lived, smoking a cigarette after a mission. Do you guys have that one?
I don't.
And he's
have
super
that one.
sweaty. He's in that fucking... what was that shirt called?
Like the combat shirt.
Yeah. He's got that on and, just soaked in sweat and just looking defeated and smoking a cigarette sitting there on the bench. I'll have to see if I can find it. I have a hard drive full of shit from Afghanistan, and that's another good one. That's one that I'll look at when I'm going through my, taking a stroll down memory lane, and I'll see that and be like, fuck.
It reminds you that it wasn't all fun and games. It wasn't all Gustav shots and Apache rockets. It was there's a human toll as well.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I mean, we came back from the Horn, and obviously the Horn was the first of many, traumatic events for our company. We had many firefights, many other wounded, and unfortunately a few other that we lost. It's an interesting dynamic as you as the lead medic, and also the medics kind of belonging to the companies. Now, yeah, I like how you phrase it. The companies belong to them, and I actually kind of prefer that. But when these events would happen, how would you kind of work with those guys to try to either help them get past it if they were struggling with it, or help them learn from those experiences so that everybody could benefit from those experiences?
Yeah, so, like I said before, I don't think that I helped them I don't think I helped them as much as you guys helped each other. So allowing the medics to embed completely in their platoons, to sleep with them, to do the everyday, bullshit that you could do when you weren't on patrol. And of course, patrol builds that brotherhood too, but just creating that separation from the aid station made it so that I think that helped their mental health more than anything. But we did do a couple things, like I said before, we had Captain Cothrell there. So he was always there to talk to him, and he had the experience on the line to know what to say. We did hot washes after we treated any sort of casualties in the aid station. Anytime that there was a casualty and the medics were on the COP and not, either fresh back from a patrol or getting ready to go out on one, we would do an all call for medics to come to the aid station so that they could, like I said before, use those experience points to level up. And then we would, we were best friends. I mean, Salvador, Doan, Burner, Todd, for the little bit of time he was there, they were all my best friends as well. And so treating them as such, not being that NCO, that hard ass, and allowing them to feel safe with whatever they felt like. Whenever they felt like they had to say something to me, they didn't have to worry about the rank. They could come and say it, and it was safe. It was all right. I think that helped a lot with those guys. But again, I think being embedded with y'all and being able to develop the relationships they did in that schoolhouse is what made the biggest difference.
And I mean, what were some lessons that you guys learned as you continued to treat casualties and run into these, different kinds of wounds, single amps, double amps, gunshot wounds, lots of TBIs. Were there any lessons learned that came out of those initial injuries that kind of helped later on?
So you get faster for sure. just from doing it.
Sure.
But as we treated in the aid station, we would refine how our beds are set up. You guys know we had those 2 litters.
Mm-hmm.
We had lines run over the litters with Class 8 hanging over it. And that Class 8 would be prepped so that you could easily, snatch it off the line, open it as quick as humanly possible, and get it on the body to get that intervention going. So just running through, especially the scenarios with the local nationals, really prepared us for when we had those nightmare scenarios where trucks were pulling up full of Bravo Company guys that needed to be treated. Because when that happened, we were ready to go. So just constantly reworking those tables so that we could be as fast as humanly possible and as efficient, and to treat smart. I think it made a huge difference in the end.
When you talk about nightmare scenarios, you're absolutely right. The day that we lost Sergeant Swindle was the definition, especially for the aid station. And honestly, if I can't imagine what we would have done if we hadn't had quick access to an aid station. Without going into too much gruesome detail, can you kind of tell us what happened that day?
Yeah, so the trucks pulled up and we got 4 casualties, 1 KIA out of the trucks. So some amputations and stuff going on there. We were able to triage outside, bring them into the aid station, get them on those tables immediately. And again, the 11 Bravos were there carrying and helping. And I actually did that day tell 3 or 4 11 Bravos to get out, because we had too many guys in there. I mean, that's your brother on the table. You want to help, but we had to clear the room a little bit. Without going into gruesome detail, it was the guys that needed to be treated were treated, and they were evac'd in a very timely manner. Yeah. Nobody else died. Nobody died that wasn't going to die anyway. So we were able to save lives. And man, at the end of the day, that day, the aid station, it took us hours to clean up. There was blood everywhere. It was crazy. But without the training and those hot washes and the refinement that had happened before, it would not have gone off that way. So we were thankful to be allowed to treat the locals.
And that was something that Price mentioned too that I think was pretty profound, was that if that event had happened early in the deployment, we might have been caught with our pants down a little bit.
Yeah, because we had a neck through and through, which I don't know for sure, but I think it nicked his carotid, which is a lot of blood. There's a lot of blood if you get hit anywhere from the neck up anyway, just because it's such a vascular area. And then that on top of 1 KIA, in the way that he was a KIA made it difficult. And then the other 2 guys, the amputee, and then the other minor wounds. It was just, it could have been overloading redefined mass cal.
Yeah.
But because it happened later in the deployment and we had that experience, it went off a lot better than it could have.
I mean, and that was probably the extent of a mass cal that our aid station could have handled. In terms of the number of casualties, we would have had to start bringing in line medics, and people would have been working on people outside of the aid station. So it was, I'm glad that was as bad as it got in terms of what we had to treat. And we've talked about the day that Sergeant Swindle was killed a little bit, and it still deserves its own conversation in terms of the entire story, but just so there's not so much suspense and unknown information about it. Essentially what happened is, while the vehicle was parked not far outside the gate, it had a direct hit from an RPG to the side. 1 in a million shot. It punctured a seam in the armor. Right
after missing the net, it missed an RPG net.
Went right through the RPG net, punctured a seam in the armor. If it hit almost anywhere else on the vehicle, it wouldn't have penetrated. But it did unfortunately penetrate into the crew compartment and caused all those casualties. So, it was a pretty bad day for Bravo Company. And, Luke and I were out on the mission when it happened. But there were a lot of guys that were we're not, because this was the point in the deployment we were starting to be kind of short on guys. So, we couldn't field entire platoons, so there was a decent number of guys back on the COP. So that brought the trauma that a lot of guys had only been seeing out on patrols to the COP for the first time for a lot of guys, and that was tough for some guys.
That being said, like, nobody performed under expectations.
Yeah.
Even the guys that hadn't seen it, the headquarters guys, like, they would swarm between the TOC and the aid station like ants, and they were always on mission and doing what they were supposed to do. So everybody always reacted admirably.
Yeah. That's one thing I always appreciated about our headquarters element, because a lot of times in infantry units, the headquarters element gets a bad name. That's where they send all the shit bags, or that's where the people on their way out of the Army go or something. But ours were phenomenal. They picked the best and brightest guys to do the jobs out there, and all of them were competent and capable of going out on patrols, and they did go out on patrols.
Yep.
So if you were an 11 Bravo in our headquarters element, that did not keep you did not keep you inside the wire, and those guys fought as hard as anybody in the platoons.
Yeah, it was, that's one of the things that we've talked about a little bit with Price, is that everybody, at some point in the deployment, everybody was getting into something, So even the cooks got into a couple of rounds,
Yeah, so. I do believe sometimes they shot at us.
It shot at us.
Hoxie, I'm a little bit bitter about the time you almost killed me. It's okay. We're cool now.
The food was always so much better after their first run-in with the Taliban.
Yeah. Yep. So, but yeah, I mean, I think, it's not that unusual that everybody on a COP comes back with a combat badge, but, given a different set of circumstances, a different set of individuals, we could have totally had people not come back with a combat badge. But everybody pulled their weight.
Yeah.
Everybody pulled their weight on that one. That kind of leads into something we talked about in the pre-interview, was that as we came back, everybody knew that what Bravo Company did was different from what the rest of 164 did. Because we were detached, and because we were with 123, and because we were in the Horn of Panjwai, we experienced a lot more. And 164 did have some incidences. They did have a couple IED strikes. The guys at Charlie Company saw a fair amount of engagements out there. But when we came back, there was definitely this thing. Okay, Bravo Company saw stuff, and we saw a lot less, and there was just kind of this weird vibe. And I know when I came back, I didn't talk about the deployment with anybody that wasn't at Sperwan Ghar, because there was just kind of this like unspoken truce, like, hey, we're not going to talk about it. Was it kind of the same thing with the medics?
Right before we left Afghanistan, I talked to my guys about being humble, and I don't think it was something I had to say. They were humble guys anyway. They had tons of humility. But when we did go back, they were kind of on the same page as you guys. It was something you just didn't to really talk about, and it was brought up, of course, because these privates that didn't have their CMB, that didn't have their CIB, or hadn't seen much out there, were sitting at CAP the whole time. They want to know. They want to hear about it. It's directly related to their job. Of course they want to know. So when we got back to the medical platoon, we shared with them. We let them know.
Yeah.
And we used lessons learned humbly. But the way that we were treated a lot different than before we left for Afghanistan. And it was hard to leave Fort Stewart. I left Fort Stewart to go to Walter Reed in Bethesda, Maryland.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that was actually, while we were in Afghanistan, I chose that duty station so I could be with the guys that we sent back over there. Yeah. Dennison was there, and I met up with him. Captain Kitching and First Sergeant came out. But yeah, so back on track, we were treated, like heroes. I mean, we were, among heroes, but people weren't bitter. They just wanted to know, and we were treated really well, and it was tough to leave because you go back into a pool of people that don't know your name, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was your experience that was the same, Luke, but I know I felt when we came back that we never felt like we were in competition with the other guys, but just that knowing that they hadn't had the same experience, that we didn't have the common ground that we had before the deployment with like the guys from Alpha Company or
yeah.
I feel like there wasn't a sense. I mean, I didn't care. I was getting out of the
Yeah,
army,
that's
so
true.
I didn't sit around and think about it. I was like, see y'all, I'm out. But
Yeah.
there's one little story that actually I think encapsulates it all.
Yeah.
Which is we were doing the what is that thing called when you get back? Reintegration.
Reintegration.
Yeah. So we were like halfway through into reintegration, and the whole battalion was gathered outside the building.
This.
We're about to go in, and we were kind of clustered around, waiting for the doors to open or whatever the thing was, and a freaking transformer blew on the light pole, and it so they had an explosion, and literally every single person in Bravo Company ducked down and started to hit the dirt, and the rest of the battalion was just like, what happened?
Yeah.
That pretty much says it all right there. Like every head in Bravo was like getting down and started looking for M4s,
Yeah, I remember that now that you mentioned. That was it was made extra funny by like the comments that our first sergeant said afterwards. And he made some smart ass comments, basically telling the rest of the battalion that they hadn't been to combat. He made some smart. He's like, that's right. Him. That's Bravo Company. They're still in war or something like that.
It's some corny thing like that.
It was something corny like that, which normally I wouldn't find something like that funny, but in the moment I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah. And it just, it's just a set of different experiences, and no two deployments are the same. As Brandon and I, his military history can speak to that,
Yeah, they're all different.
Yeah, everyone's different.
And I appreciate that everyone had the maturity to recognize that for the most part. They're like, hey, we're not going to hold this over Alpha Company's head because, a different set of circumstances. It could have been us at CAF and them at Sperwan Ghar. So, I think most people were pretty cognizant that it was just, hey, I agree, be humble. It's a piece of advice that I received myself a couple of years later when I received my award, and Captain Kitchen called me. He said, hey, it's been approved, yada, yada, yada. He's like, just remember, be humble. And that's something that I've taken to extreme degrees. Especially when talking about my military service, and it's, I'd rather be seen as the person that was excessively humble and soft-spoken than someone that was a braggart.
Well, I mean, being humble makes your voice louder, and you want a loud voice so that people know the story. And you guys are, this is what y'all are doing. You're sharing the story with everybody. Mm-hmm. And if you were not humble people, I don't think you'd be doing this podcast.
Yeah, I was talking to my brother today about how it's been really weird for me to actually talk about all this stuff, because I kept it all stitched up for so long, even from my immediate family members, not even stories, not even like the one time we did this, like just none of anything.
Yeah.
Because I never wanted to be that guy. That was always my thing. When I went into the deployment, because we knew it's going to be bad, I was like, this is not going to define me. Like, I'm not going to be that guy. And I carried that through for a long time until we started the podcast. but yeah, I think I really appreciate the fact that you had the foresight as a leader, but also as a friend and a fellow soldier to kind of preempt your return with that message for your guys, because like you said, that carries weight when you demonstrate humility about your service, especially when it was as harsh as Afghanistan was for us. Like, that's a classy act, classy move, and like you said, silence speaks words, or silence speaks volumes,
It does.
And if you're out the VFW, the guy sitting around eating fried chicken and drinking Bud Light and flapping to the jaws probably didn't see a fucking thing. Yeah. And
he was on the USS Indianapolis on their summer tour in 1997.
Yeah.
And
when the guy who went the entire semester, and you find out in the last week of classes that he also was a veteran, maybe he's seen some shit, So humility is an important thing that a lot of military service members don't get bred into them as much as they should. Especially
as our fighting force transitions away from a large population of combat veterans, I think it's even more important. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of guys. I mean, Brandon, how many of your soldiers have CMBs.
Yeah, you don't really see. I mean, you don't even see patches on the right sleeve anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's the military is changing, and if you weren't a humble person, you probably wouldn't be in the position that you're in either. You know, it's if you were, oh, I got a CMB, I'm this badass. You know, no one wants to work for that guy. No one wants to work next to that guy.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in the infantry ranks, and it's the same thing in aviation ranks. People will appreciate that badge on your chest much more if you pretend like it's not there.
Yeah, nobody wants to be that guy, and you know, that's probably the guy who was shitting himself while the rounds were flying.
You know, there's a lot of truth to that too. Well, Brandon, what we always kind of close these things out is give you a chance to speak your mind. You know, if there's something we have not covered or something you want to say or something you want to address, this is kind of your chance to say whatever you want. You know, the floor is 100% yours.
Well, I don't really have a whole lot to say, I guess. I mean, pretty much covered everything that I think people need to hear about. It's good to share Sean's story and my guy's story. I mean, the important people out there were definitely the junior medics, man. Like you said, very, very few breaks. They were out there with you guys nonstop. I handled some of the logistics stuff, and one thing we didn't get to talk about, I guess, was just the medics' job as morale officers out there.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just we talked about ordering from like Soldiers Angels, getting those packages in for the guys, being able to cut guys' hair, playing video games with guys, playing board games with guys, talking to guys. We didn't have a behavioral health specialist out there, so it was kind of on those junior medics to do that. So I would say to anybody listening who is a medic and ever finds himself in this situation, just remember your only job isn't to heal physically, but to become friends with every single guy, even the guy that you don't like in your platoon, and make sure that they are mentally sound and ready to fight, because it's kind of an unspoken job of medics. You got to be everybody's best friend.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I always say there's 3 people in the platoon or in the company you never piss off: medics, cooks, and supply.
Yeah. See, for us, it's just the cooks and supply.
Yeah, right.
Mainly supply.
Yeah.
Bolts don't fly, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad you remembered to bring that up, because it's when you're a private, especially when you're new, when you're young and you're in war, you know, your chain of command is terrifying. You know, you are scared of your team leader, you're terrified of your squad leader, you're absolutely petrified of your platoon sergeant, and you don't even want to look at your first sergeant.
Yeah.
So the medics are like this outside force that is around, that don't really answer to those people, not directly at least. So when they come in and they shoot the shit with you and they bullshit, you can feel like a normal person again. So I always appreciated the efforts that you guys made, cutting hair, inviting us to go play board games or to smoke pit, or, you know, I don't know if asking us to smoke with you was probably great for our health, but I appreciate it.
Hey, we did too.
Yeah, cool. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy man. You got life to live, so we definitely appreciate you taking some time and hanging out with us and catching up, man.
Oh, yeah, man. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. People need to hear it, and I look forward to the future episodes you guys got to offer.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Panjwai Podcast. If you liked what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. New episodes every Monday on all major podcast platforms, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit www.thepanjwaipodcast.com for more information.